Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to run through these points in this opening presentation. I think the rest of the webinar is going to be more of a workshop format where we'll work through the actual documents. But yeah, this is just part of the introduction. So I'll just talk about the initial checklists that we started with. And then I'll talk about how we identified some current FIDIC guidelines, which helped us to update our documents and develop them to the management system declarations that we've had up until now. I'll then show everyone how to access the MSDs on the CESA website. I'll just talk a little bit about their structure, and then I'll say how we optimized them until we got to our current versions. I'll just show everyone how to find previous recordings of webinars that we've done before. And then also I'll just touch on the benefits of the different management system declarations. So first of all, right in the beginning, when I joined the Quality, Risk and Sustainability Committee, there were two guidelines that were available from CESA. Very good guidelines. The first was the Quality Management Implementation Guideline, which we refer to as the QMIC. And the purpose of this guideline was to verify that members had a system in place to manage the quality of their work. It could be used to sort of grade oneself as to how developed their system is, and also it could be used to assist you to develop your system further, to see how much further you had to go in order to be ready to certify your company to ISO 9001. Then secondly, there was the Risk Management Implementation Guideline, the RMIG, and it basically talked about what sort of risks consulting companies faced and how to manage those risks on a project level, but also in the business itself. And that document was last updated in 2021, and I think we also updated the QMIC. So these documents still are available from the CESA website, and they're very good references for the management systems declaration. In addition to that, we also had a sustainability guideline and checklist. At the stage when this was built or drafted, it was more referencing general sustainability information rather than specific FIDIC documents or anything like that. So it was just a useful reference which members could use to help do their work more sustainably. And then lastly, there was the Business Integrity Management Guideline, which was drafted in October 2009. And the purpose of that document was to ensure that members acted with integrity in their business. It's very similar to the code of conduct that CESA had at the time, and also the EXA code of conduct. But I think in 2008, the QMIC was based on FIDIC's interpretation of ISO 9001, which was updated in 2008. But it was updated again in 2015. And there was quite a big change from ISO 9001 2008 to 2015. And we realized at that stage that we actually need to update the QMIC itself. So CESA went through the process of appointing a consultant to update the QMIC, but they came back and the checklist was over 100 questions long. And we thought it was a bit cumbersome, for members to work through this long checklist. So we thought at the time that we really need to try and simplify it and come up with something a little bit more user-friendly. At the same time, we thought, well, if we're updating the QMIC, we should update the integrity and the sustainability checklists as well. So I think that was at that point where we said, well, let's look for documents that could assist us in updating these checklists, which are available at the moment and are based on current thinking. And CESA is aligned with FIDIC, and so that was a natural place to start. And we saw that FIDIC had actually published an updated interpretation of ISO 9001/2015. So we used that to develop the quality checklist. And then we also noted that FIDIC had guidelines for integrity management. So we used that reference. And also a project sustainability management document, which we could then reference for sustainability. So that naturally led to the development of the management system declarations as we have it. And so we've relied quite heavily on the FIDIC guidelines, and that's really good, because then these documents become the reference manuals for filling out the MSD and trying to interpret and back up what CESA is looking for when the members are working through these MSDs. At the end of the day, if you're working through the MSDs and you're filling them out, and you come to the realization that you are doing what the MSDs request of you, then you realize that you are actually meeting FIDIC requirements, and that's basically equating your company on the international level of FIDIC. So it's a good place to be, and that's the direction that CESA had chosen to head towards. So after we developed the MSDs, they were still a bit rough around the edges. We sent them to the CESA Quality, Risk and Sustainability Committee, and we asked them to fill it out as if they were filling it out for their companies. And they sent us comments back, and that allowed us to make the MSDs more user-friendly. We also developed a guideline for completing the MSDs, which is available on the CESA website. It's just referred to as the procedure for CESA management system declarations. And then at that point, CESA had also appointed their website developer to convert the MSDs from being paper-based to being an online form to be filled in. So when we work through the MSDs later on in the workshop, you'll see the paper, the Word versions that we had developed, and those then became the actual checklists that are currently on the CESA website. CESA decided to make the completion of the MSDs mandatory. So CESA has this need to confirm that their members are developing their management systems, and so that's why they've made it mandatory. I think every time a member firm completes the MSD, it's an acknowledgement that CESA and CESA's members are aiming towards better developed systems. So hence they made it mandatory, and they linked it to the annual declaration, so that when the members are filling out the annual declarations, they can also fill out the MSDs, and everything can be done at the same time. We do, you'll see when I go through the structure, have a requirement to provide evidence for the answers given in the MSDs. But I also make the point later that the evidence doesn't need to be uploaded. It just needs to be made available. So should the member go through a verification process, we can look at those documents and confirm that that is what CESA is intending as meeting that point. So basically, by filling out the MSDs, it's providing CESA with the assurance that the members are they do have, first of all, they do have these management systems in place. They are developing it, and we're now in our 4th year of running the MSDs, and we can see the improvement from one year to another, and I think that's what CESA's aim is. It's not only to have members that have their MSDs at 100%, but also to see improvement from one year to the next. So I'm just going to quickly shoot through how to find the MSDs on the CESA website. We just basically, you head over to the CESA website. You'll see at the top there's the member login, and that takes you to where all the really good member information is. You'll hit the login requirement. If you don't have these details, you can contact Gillian at CESA and she'll send these to you. Once you're through the password and you come to this screen, you'll see basically all the documents that you get as a member. There's lots of stuff that's not behind the password that you can access as well, but as a paid member, there's some really good stuff in here, such as like the practice notes and the previous presentations. But I mean, what we're focusing now is on the annual declaration. And like I said earlier, we lumped the MSDs with the annual declaration. So this is the way to access it. Once you are into the annual declarations and you've clicked on, either the integrity, the sustainability, or the quality MSD, you'll be confronted with the checklist for each of those. And that's basically what you see on your screen now. So I'm just going to run through. This is a screen grab from the integrity MSD, and all three have a very similar structure. So just running quickly through, the laser on. So you start with 1. So that's the MSD number. And I think when we're working through the checklists and you have a question, it'll be really useful to put the MSD number question in your question so that we can shoot to that, and it's just an easy reference. The next 2 columns is the reference documents that we used to develop this question. So for instance, for the integrity MSD, we referenced 2 of FIDIC's integrity documents. So you can have those documents available. And I don't know if you've seen in the chat box, but Philip has already put a link where you can download these documents for free in PDF version and have them as reference documents while you're working through the MSD. So for this question, you would be able to open up both references to these sections and read up more about what we were thinking when we developed this question in the MSD. Then point number 4 is the actual question. You've got the question at the top, and then you've got a paragraph of additional text, which is just trying to unpack what CESA wants from this question. Once you've read the question, you think to yourself, yes, we do that. So you tick yes, or no, we're not doing that yet. That's something that we still have to develop, and so that there's a plan there. Or it could be not applicable. And for example, if you look at this question, has top management documented an integrity policy statement? There's many CESA member firms where it's just one person in the company, and they're not going to have an integrity policy statement because their integrity policy statement is their personal integrity. So in that case, you could just say not applicable, and you just say my company is just me, and therefore I don't have an integrity policy. But if you do, then you would list here in your evidence column, yes, I have an integrity policy. The code is I.5 or whatever. And then when we verify your company, should we get to that point, we can easily open up and say, okay, you said you've got an integrity policy. Let's open it up and have a look. And that's basically what we do during the verification. So just some additional points here. We don't ask you to upload these documents. So just a note for our reference. When you verify in the actual meeting, you'll flash it. We'll look through it. We're not trying to keep records of documentation. And I know lots of companies have their own intellectual property, and we might be looking through client confidential information, and we don't want to keep any of that. We just really want to open it up and confirm that you're doing it, and then close it. So we don't want copies of documents or anything. We just want to open it and verify it if we do verify your company. And then, as well, I already said that the intention is not to score 100%, but just to give CESA an accurate reflection of where your company is in terms of the development. And then the other thing as well is that it might take quite a while to work through all the checklists, but the very first time you do this, you work through it, it takes a while, but the next year, your answers automatically roll over from the previous year, because when we decided to do this, we were like, your company's not going to move backwards, right? You're only going to move forward. So there will be some questions where you go from a no to a yes. And so all the answers from previous year automatically roll over, and you only change the ones that you are now doing. So it gets quicker and quicker and quicker each time you do it. Okay, then just in terms of optimization, like I said, the first year we sent out the MSDs to our members and asked them to complete it. It was in 2021. We had a small turnout of people who actually did it. It was less than 20%. But we got really good feedback from those members that did do it, and they basically asked specific questions, and we could see some of the MSD questions we had to slightly change to be a bit more clearer. So we've updated as we go along. We're now in our 4th year, and I think we've hit the 50% mark of members completing these. So we're really trying to get that last 50% to do these, because not only does it give CESA assurance, but it really helps the company to understand, what their systems can develop to. Okay, just some other important information. So if everyone's not aware, CESA has a YouTube channel which can be accessed from their website, or you can just use the link, or you could try to find it yourself on YouTube. They call it CETV. There was a previous MSD webinar. It was a lot higher level than what we're doing today. It was really just the background and talking about some of the questions and the structure. It's not going to be the workshop that we're going to do this morning, where we're going to actually dig right into the checklists and talk about some of the questions. Then just last on verification. So in order to confirm that the clients are not just using this as a tick box exercise, the members, we really want to verify that the members have the evidence that they say that they have. So at this stage, we very much in a pilot stage of this verification process. So for the last 2 or 3 years, we've verified. We aim for like 10 members a year. And I don't know if there's consultants on here that we've verified before, but I mean, if you speak to them, they will let you know that it's a really, really useful process to learn what CESA is requiring. And we're not just there to say, yes, you do it, no, you don't do it, let's move on to the next question. For questions where it's no, we really just talk about what system development stage you're at and how we can get to the next level. So it's a learning opportunity, and it shouldn't be seen as you're doing a test, but more as just a check-in. Like I'm here, I'm at this level. These are our documents, and these are stages where we're not yet developed, and then we say yes, we agree with you. You had a 60%. Let's see what we can do to get you to 70% next year, sort of thing. So we open up the same checklist that you fill in, but on our side, on the back end, on the CESA platform, we've got some additional columns which just basically say yes, verified, or verified with comments, or no, they misunderstood the question, so they're not quite there yet. And so after that, we generate a report, which we then send to the client, to the member firm, which says yes, they are 100% verified, or 80%, or whatever the case is. So then just the last few slides, just some benefits of systems. I mean, I really think they talk for themselves, but I'll just touch on some of these points. The benefits of having a quality system, it prevents things from going wrong. So for instance, if you had a system that said all deliverables that leave this company must be reviewed by a senior person before they get issued, you immediately know you can pick up more mistakes than if those go out without that review. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about. And then second bullet, protects you when things do go wrong. If you have a system that says absolutely everything must have a documented record, not necessarily printed on paper, but saved in a cloud, then if things do go wrong, you can say, here's all the documentation. These are all the steps that we took to get to this point. So just some other things. If you have a very well-established quality system, it enhances your reputation. You know, if you're ISO 9001 certified, it's, you know, some clients only want consultants who are at that level already. So it's definitely good for your reputation. You win more work when you issue quality deliverables. Things like when you send a report out and it has mistakes in it, spelling mistakes, you know, you're not doing yourself any good service there. We talked about reducing risks and errors, and obviously it saves you money if you have a very efficient management system and you're working through the steps systematically. You're doing things in less time than somebody who doesn't have such a good system. Benefits of implementing an integrity management system. I think I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but obviously you're promoting ethical behavior in your company. You know, you're reducing corruption in our industry and in our country, which is really important. And as well, I mean, if you're acting in your work with a high level of integrity, it's going to reflect in the quality of your work. Lastly, with sustainability, essentially, if you're taking a sustainable view on your projects, you're going to reduce energy consumption, water consumption, and materials consumption. So your projects will automatically cost less. You know, if you consider climate change, which is starting to become a requirement in all aspects of ISO documents, your projects will be more resilient to how climate changes over time. And I think just the other thing as well is that, you know, sustainability might not quite be as strong a buzzword in South Africa as it is in the rest of the world, but it's certainly where we're heading. I mean, we have to be heading in that direction. So if your company is already, you know, taking a sustainable approach in its work, and it's something that you can market, you're really going to stand out above your peers who are not there yet. So just various aspects of thinking about considering sustainability.
Run through today is basically run through the actual MSD questions. So you'll see this is generally when you log on to complete your MSDs, this is what you will see. As Oliver and Charles said, there is a reference to the FIDIC guide at the top. You'll see there's a reference 1 and a reference 2 for the quality one. There are 2 documents that we refer to. And in the MSD, you'll see the reference as Charles said. So at least it allows you to track back to see what is the requirement that we base in this question on. And it also allows you to go and find further information regarding and what you need to be addressing. Right, so for the quality side, there are quite a few questions. We have compacted it into 38 questions. We basically have 4 main sections within the quality MSD. So you'll see there are headings as we go through. The first one talks to business strategy planning and leadership within your organization. We'll then focus on project delivery, looking at the 6 exit stages. We then have a look at support services and what the requirements are from quality from your support services. And in the last section, we're going to end off is with performance evaluation. And that's just to make sure that you're reviewing your systems to see that they are actually performing well and suiting your requirements. Okay, so as you go into your MSD, the first question you'll be asked is if you are ISO certified. So if you are certified, it's great because then you don't have to go and complete all the rest of the questions. So for those that you are certified, please just enter in the name of your certification body, the registration number of your certificate, the validity date, as well as just your first certification. But for those of you that don't have your ISO 9001 certificate, please go and start answering the questions. And that's what we're going to be running through today. So the first question, question 1, just asks, does the company have a management plan in place that identifies the objectives of the organization to reduce enterprise and project risks. So basically, I always say this is like your strategic plan. It's very important to include in that plan a view of internal and external factors, how they impact on your organization. This can be done through a SWOT analysis or similar. And also consider interested parties, where interested parties are not just your clients, but they actually extend to your shareholders, to your employees, to suppliers, regulatory bodies. Think of what are their needs and expectations from your organization. And I've just put a note there, and Charles did touch on this also earlier, is please consider climate change. If you are going to implement the ISO 9001 standard, it is a requirement, it's an additional requirement that they added last year, that you need to think about how is climate change going to impact my organization and how is it going to impact my interested parties. So consider it in your strategic plan and see how you're going to actually manage it going forward. Right, question 2 asks about, has your company scope been documented? This is basically what you do and where you do it. So just some tips there is have some sort of evidence of documented scope. It could be on your website, it could be in marketing material. Just make sure it's consistent across all your platforms where you showing this information. And also what I generally also encourage firms to do is run your company scope or your scope of services past your PI insurers, just to make sure that you are covered for the scope of services that you're offering to your clients. Question 3 asks you, are the requirements of the company's processes documented? So once you've identified your scope of services of what you're going to be producing, you then need to identify the processes that are going to make you or assist you to achieve those services. And it's very important to define these somewhere, because you need to give your staff guidance on what they should be doing. So evidence on company processes could be workflows, it could be manuals, it could be work instructions. And what's very nice with the 2015 standard is they're moving more towards technology. They're not forcing you to have procedures. You can document your system in any way that you see fit to suit your organization. So I also encourage, think about technology, move with the times, integrate smartphones, apps, BIM, all that type into your processes to make sure that you document in them that they're easy to understand and accessible to your staff. Then question 4 asks, once you've documented all your processes, it's very important to induct or train your staff on those requirements. And you must be able to show evidence of that. So typical evidence could be induction records, it could be internal training records, but it's important to have some sort of evidence that says, look, here is evidence that we did actually induct our staff into our company processes. And going forward, this also protects the company at the end of the day. If someone disputes being told what they should be doing, if you've got your internal training records, it will back you up to say, but I did inform my staff on what they should be doing. So very important is to have those records of that training. Question 5 asks, has top management documented a quality policy stated, or do you have a written mission statement on quality? So I think most of us will have documented somewhere a quality policy. I think lots of clients also request this, especially if you're tendering on projects, they want to see what is your stance on quality, and they request your quality policy statement. So make sure you've got your quality policy statement. I always encourage people use it as a marketing document. It's something that's showing where do you stand on quality, what is your directions, and it ties in very, very nicely to your strategic plan as well. So those two documents, your strategic plan, should actually drive your quality plan. And that could be looking at what type of scope of services are you going to be pursuing, what are your focus areas. If you've got a focus area in training or technology, it basically informs your clients of where are you going and how are you going to improve going forward. And then also very important with your quality policy statement, just make sure that it is available. So it must be available to staff. It must be available to external parties. It's a lovely sort of marketing document, again, that you can put on your websites. I've seen some firms also put it a link in their email signatures. So there are lots of ways where you can make this known to your external parties. Right. Then question 6 asks, has top management established measurable quality objectives? And this is very important. So once you've put your strategic plan into place, you've got your quality policy, says this is where we want to be with our quality, our stance on our quality. Your objectives are then the measure by which you're going to see, are we actually achieving our quality policy? And at the end of the day, are we actually achieving our strategic plan? So it's very important to somehow set up your objectives. And I've highlighted there below that they must be for each process or function and at each level throughout your organization. So I generally encourage firms, think about your different departments, make sure each department has an objective that they're striving towards. Also look at it, don't just have objectives for your directors in the company, they should filter down to everyone within the organization. So somewhere have your objectives, have them documented. And I've also just added there a note, make sure that they're SMART objectives. And what's very, very important is they must be measurable. So I always find it's good to put a specific target to an objective so you can measure to see, are we achieving it or aren't we achieving it? It's also good to track your objectives. So I generally recommend is do quarterly reviews to see where do we stand with our objectives, because objectives can change. If you just think when COVID hit, how everyone's objectives went out the door and we had to change and we had to adapt. So rather review, make them something that's going to add value to your organization, but make sure you track them. Don't wait until the end of the year and suddenly you realize, oh, we haven't met any of our objectives that we set out to do. So have measurable objectives, have them throughout the organization, and just make sure that you are reviewing them at a regular interval. Then question 7 asks, does top management communicate the importance of the quality management system to its staff? So again, this could be done, it ties in very closely with your induction training, your awareness training. But very often firms will have regular staff meetings where they sort of highlight issues from the quality system that need to be addressed, or maybe areas where they see the firm is lacking. So think about how you communicate the importance and make sure everyone has that buy-in. They understand what is required of them from the quality system, because as soon as they understand why they're doing something, then generally that's when people start to buy in. And I think it's also important at this stage is when you communicate the importance of the quality system, you should also communicate the consequences that will happen if you do not implement your quality management system, because there must be a consequence at the end of the day. Otherwise, people will start slacking off. They will, try and take shortcuts. So try and have positive things, incentive schemes maybe when you're reviewing staff and how they embrace the quality. But make sure also that if people are not embracing the quality, that there is some sort of consequence relating to that. Then question 8 talks about our roles, responsibilities, and authorities. So here you can basically define your roles and responsibilities and authorities within your organization. Firstly, you can do it right at the start when you're looking for new staff. That's where you can spell out the roles and responsibilities in a job description, especially if you're advertising. It will also require what competencies need to be there. Other ways of defining roles, responsibilities, and authorities could be through an organizational structure that basically identifies who's who within your organization, who reports to who. You can actually associate responsibilities with that on your organizational structure. And then also what I really like is an authorization matrix or a delegation of authority. of who has the authority within the organization to do certain things. And I think this is becoming more and more focused, especially from the CESA side, to say who can actually sign off certain things, review certain things. So I think it's a good idea to work this into your organization, have those delegation of authorities in place, make sure that the people that have the correct competencies are at those levels to authorize or to release information. But very important, draw up some sort of delegation or authorization. The people within your organization know, this is what I can be doing, I need to pass this on to someone else. Very important to have those lines defined. Right, and then the last one that we talk about in our business strategy planning and leadership is question 9. And this asks, does the company identify overall business risk and opportunity together with mitigating action plans? So this is very important. This is not looking at risk and opportunity within your projects. It's actually looking at it from a global perspective and looking at what are the risk and opportunities to the business. So good ways to track this is to make use of risk and opportunity registers. You can also do business risk assessments, but it's an important factor is have a look. And sometimes this also, firms can get very bogged down in the detail. Look at your major risks and your major opportunities. And I always say, think about things that will impact on reputation, impact on cash flows, impact possibly on health and safety of your staff. Look at those big items and see what risks and opportunities are associated with those things and treat those first. And then you can start looking at sort of your less intensive risk and opportunities, or risk and opportunities that don't need so much focus. But it really is a good idea. Have a sort of a way of identifying risk and opportunity, have a way of tracking it, documenting it, especially just to make sure that once you've implemented an action, is to then to look back and say, right, well, was our action actually effective? Did we reduce that risk, or did we make that opportunity a reality? So it's very important to have that sort of after the fact review of your risk or an opportunity to see were we effective. And basically there is a prompt there if you want some additional guidance on risk management. And this is also what Shoal touched on in the opening presentation, is you can go and have a look at the CESA RMEG, the CESA, the Risk Management Implementation Guideline. That is on the CESA net. I think it is available to member firms. So please go and download it and access it. It really has got some great information contained within it. Okay, so those first 9 questions basically talk to our business strategy, planning, and leadership. So that's looking at the overall management of your organization. So just to recap, really important, have a strategic plan in place, define your scope of services, look at what processes you need in order to deliver those scope of services, train your staff on those processes. They must understand what they need to be doing. Have a quality policy statement that ties in with your strategic plan. Have objectives, because now you need to measure, are we going to achieve our policy? Are we going to achieve our strategic plan? Put together measurable objectives to see that we are actually achieving that. Communicate to your staff the importance. Like I said, think about consequence. Define roles and responsibilities within your organization so everyone knows what they should be doing, what level of authority they have within your organization. And very, very important is look at risk and opportunity. And again, like with your objectives, you need to track your risk and opportunity. So that is something that you should be looking at maybe on a quarterly basis, maybe a monthly basis, whatever is the requirement of your firm. But don't identify risk or opportunity at maybe the start of the year, and by the end of the year you realize, oh, we didn't actually do anything about it. So please track those elements. Okay, then the second part of the quality MSD is dealing with project delivery. And the way that we've broken up the MSDs, we've just looked at the CESA project stages, and we've sort of seen where do the FIDIC and the ISO requirements, where do they actually relate back to the CESA stages? And we've tried to group them under the different stages. So the first stage of project delivery is inception. And question 10 asks the very important question, does the company formally communicate project requirements relating to scope, fee, time to the client or a similar authority? So this is a very important aspect from quality, and I think just a very important aspect from project management. You need to define your project requirements up front, because if you go and actually have a look at the definition of quality, quality is delivering something to a predetermined set of requirements. So it's very important that you understand what those requirements are up front in order to deliver a quality product. So evidence that you can have to demonstrate that you have identified project requirements could be a written proposal, it could be a brief, it could be a tender, it could be a quotation. But try and define it somewhere. It's really important, because this is also going to help you to manage scope creep as you go further into your projects. So have a focus on how do you identify or how do you communicate project requirements. And also remember, when a client comes to you, they necessarily don't know everything they need to have on the project. So you as a professional also need to identify the requirements that they don't know about, and you need to advise them of those. So very important to be, I always say, rather spend too much time up front looking at requirements than trying to backpedal at the end of the day when we have scope creep or changes or disputes regarding fees. If you've got a good set of requirements set up at the start, you're going to cover yourself so much more. Then once you've identified your project requirements, question 11 asks, does the company retain signed written agreements with the client or similar authority confirming all the agreed project requirements? So maybe you defined your requirements in an email somewhere, however you did it, but try and then convert it into a written agreement. And with your written agreement, and I've highlighted it there, it should have the terms and conditions of what is this agreement based on. And I think a lot of the time, if we're just sending out emails or sending out, a letter of, a proposal, very often we forget to refer to a set of terms and conditions. So that's why I always say, try and get something, try and get like an industry standard agreement behind you, get your client to sign it or have evidence of that, because when things go wrong, that's going to be the document that we need to go back onto. And a lot of the PI insurers say this is where the problems arise. If you get a claim in and they start investigating and there's no written agreement, it just makes that fight so much more difficult. So rather be proactive, have an agreement, have it signed off, have it in place right up front. Right, so that was basically our stage 1, which was inception. Stages 2 and 3, we've put them together and lumped them sort of into one sort of main design category. So that takes your concept, viability, and design development. And the reason why we do this is if you go and have a look at the FIDIC documents and the ISO documents, they refer to design. They don't distinguish between concept and detailed design. So the first part of design is very important to have a plan. And you'll see lots, when we talk about quality, you probably heard a lot of people talk about your plan, do, check, act, that every process within your organization should follow those 4 actions. So everything you do, if you're designing, there should be a plan. If you're going to site, there should be a plan. If you're doing your management, there should be a plan. And that's talking about your strategic plan. So everything that we start off with, we need to have some sort of plan. So question 12 asks the question, does the company implement a project plan or similar? Define in your project requirements, project risk, required resources, verification and validation criteria, coordination, controls, etc. So it's very important to spell this out up front. And it's a fantastic document to have to communicate, firstly, internally to your team, and then externally to your client and other your external team. So think about how you're going to show evidence of the plan. And it could be some organizations put together a project quality plan. You might use MS Projects, which identifies activities, resources, timelines. Or another one that works really well from a planning perspective is to use your stage reports, because a lot of the clients, especially like your government clients, they require that you submit a report at the end of each of the EXA stages. So structure your report in such a way that it actually addresses all the planning issues. And that is evidence of your plan. The only issue I have with using a project report, a stage report as evidence of planning, is that if you have risks that are associated with your client or your external team, you can't really pull them into your report. So that needs to be then documented internally somewhere. Another fantastic document that I've recently seen being used as a plan is a project activity register, which allows you to document or to list all the activities within the project. And this could be like risk items. It can be objectives of the project that you want to achieve. It can be feedback that's coming in. But it's one document that allows you to list all your planning issues and track those issues, to assign them to someone, follow up, close them out. But very important, put together a project plan. And there's a note here at the bottom again, go and have a look at your the RMEG, the CESA Risk Management Implementation Guideline, because a big part of quality and quality management is the identification of risk. So in the RMEG, they do a lovely summary per project stage of what are your generic risks that you could encounter per stage. So it's a nice sort of prompter to your project team to say, right, guys, we're going into this stage. These could be typical risks that we might be facing in the stage. And it also is just a good place to start brainstorming and trying to figure out what could potentially go wrong on the project and how are we going to plan for this. So project plan or similar, just make sure you've got something that's documented. Even if you're using like planner software, that's perfect as well. Question 13 asks the question, does the company ensure all project inputs are adequate prior to the implementation of the design? When we talk about inputs, we talk about anything that you're using. Generally, it's from an external source that you're using to base your design or your project on. So it could be geotechnical reports, it could be investigations that you get in, it could be surveys, it could be architects' drawings, whatever it is. But what is very important is you as a designer or you as an engineer, you need to make sure that those inputs are adequate. We don't say that they have to be approved by yourself, because naturally you're not the specialist that's doing them, but you need to see that they're adequate. So if I'm reviewing a geotechnical report, I'm going to just make sure, has the geotech gone to the correct site? Are the results consistent with what I would think I would get in that area? You have to do a bit of due diligence on your inputs. And the reason why this is so important is if your inputs aren't adequate or aren't correct, that means that whatever you're producing, you're going to be basing on incorrect information. So your information is going to be incorrect. So evidence of reviews of inputs. This could be, markups on the actual received documentation. We often used to do that. So if I get in a geotech report on my email, I'll go through it. It's in PDF. I can put comments on. I can highlight certain things. And then generally I would put my name and the date that I reviewed it. And as soon as I put it into the project folder and people access their document, they can see, Diane has reviewed this. She's highlighted that there is a high water table that we need to take into account. But it gives you that satisfaction, or that gives the team that satisfaction that someone has actually reviewed it and it is adequate. So just be creative in how you're going to demonstrate that. And like I said, it could just be putting it into a folder in your project, maybe under external info that goes approved for adequacy or the likes of that. Right, question 14 then talks about our actual designs, and it asks, does the company control the design by reviewing, verifying, and validating the design to ensure your project requirements are met? Our evidence there is you can have some sort of documented design reviews. And I think this is quite important. The next question talks more about our deliverables, checking our deliverables. But very often as engineers, we fail to have evidence of a design review. So whatever you design in, make sure that you are getting someone to review your design. And this is the important part. Document that design review. So, it doesn't always have to be a formal document that you put together. If you sit in around a table and you are redlining drawings, take a photo with your phone, save it to the server. There you've got the markup. It's evidence of a review of the design. So really think of how you're going to show that you have had someone review it. If it's software, that you're using, do a check with a spreadsheet, do a hand check, but just verify that whatever you get in is correct. It is in line with what you should be doing. And like I say, be creative of how you do that. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. Whatever you're doing as a check, take a photo, put PDF, put comments on, scribble on stuff, but have some sort of evidence of a review, and especially of the design, because that's where most of PI claims, the origin of the PI claims can be traced back to our design function. Right, question 15 then talks about review of deliverables. So does the company review all deliverables to ensure that the design intent is correctly reflected on the deliverable? So the previous question, we checked our design, but now we need to make sure this has our design been carried across correctly onto our deliverables. And deliverables can be our drawings, our reports, our specifications, schedules, whatever that deliverable is. But make sure that you have evidence of the review. And we've given some examples there of evidence. It could be redlining of deliverables. It could be inserting comments onto deliverables, especially if it's PDFs. It could be initiating maybe track changes. So if I'm viewing a report, I might want to put track changes on, and I put comments in. I go and I save that with the track changes on as evidence of a review. So be creative again in how you retain evidence of your review. And I think also going forward, a lot of these reviews can be done online. So as I know, I think it's MS Teams has a fantastic sort of review app in it, and an authorized app. So think about, if you're having a review meeting, record the meeting, it's evidence of a review. So really be creative in how you retain evidence of your reviews. Right, then question 16 basically talks about, it asks, does the company communicate specific requirements to the project team to ensure the disciplines are coordinated and requirements of each discipline are taken into consideration in the design of the project? So it's very important to demonstrate here that there is a level of coordination happening. So generally it happens once we've done our concept design, we then take it, once we finalize our concept, we then present it to the client, to the rest of the team, to allow for that coordination of the different disciplines. So it's very important to give evidence that that coordination is happening somehow. And again, it could be minutes of project meetings, it could be recordings of meetings, however you want to do it. I mean, I think a lot of times now, is especially if you're getting into modeling and BIM, a lot of the coordination happens within the model. So try and find creative ways of demonstrating that these coordination sessions are happening. But it's very important, because if we design in isolation and we haven't taken into account the other disciplines, the problems will always come out on sites when you start finding clashes or things aren't working, and then it becomes quite a mission, and it becomes quite expensive to implement those changes, or to do coordination once you're on site. So very important, coordinate up front and have evidence of that coordination. Okay, then question 17 asks the question about change. So does the company manage change by ensuring that changes to scope are identified, approved, and communicated? So very important, and I think also just my past jobs, this is where we lost money, is management of change. And the thing is, change will always happen. I don't think I've ever had a project that started off with one thing and ended at the end exactly with that one thing. As it developed through the different stages, and we found different maybe site conditions and users have different requirements, that's when we start incorporating change. And change is a very positive thing, but if you don't manage change correctly, it's going to have a very negative impact on your organization. So management of change, this you can show by implementing change registers. Also quite important is implementing change approvals. So if I've got a change that is going to have an impact on time and cost with my client or similar body, I must have evidence that they have approved it before I've implemented it. So when you identify a change, make sure you assess the impact of the change, and if necessary, make sure that you get that approval from your client or whoever that you can actually proceed with the change. Because generally changes always result in some sort of change to the cost or to the program of the project. So rather inform those people that need to take that decision, get their approval before you implement that change. Another great way of managing change and showing evidence of your management of change is just version control and tracking of changes. So that's why it's so important on your documents that you are issuing is have version control. If you can describe, well, you should be describing what were the changes. I always say try and be too descriptive when you describe change. I think one of the saddest things I saw was a drawing being given to a contractor, and the whole drawing was clouded. And in the description box, it said changes as clouded. And the thing is, when you don't describe the change, or you don't point out the change to the person that needs to work from it, they might miss something. So rather highlight it, bring it to the attention so that everyone knows what is the change and they can actually implement those changes correctly. Right, then we get to our stage 4 of our project delivery, and that is basically documentation and procurement. So question 18 asks the question, does the company ensure that all deliverables issued to external bodies have traceability back to the person authorizing the release of the deliverable? And this is very important. This is it's a FIDIC requirement, it's an ISO requirement, it's an EXA requirement as well. So make sure that there is some sort of means within your organization that anything that leaves your organization, there's traceability back to that person who said, yes, I have checked this and I can authorize that you can release it to a third party. And the evidence that we've given there as a suggestion, and I generally find this probably to be the easiest way, is to put a signature onto the deliverable. But just be careful. Nowadays with electronic signatures, this is becoming also a very sort of risky area where people have scanned in signatures. They insert in signatures onto documents that is not, that might not be your signature. Your signature is not protected. So really think if you go in that route of issuing all your deliverables with signatures, make sure that the signatures are protected. If necessary, use relevant software to protect or encrypt your signatures. But it's important, somehow you must have traceability back to persons authorizing the release. And this could be done. It doesn't have to just be done with signatures. If you've got a system within your company where you do authorizations on emails, maybe you email a document to your line manager, they review it, and they'll send you back an email saying, thank you, you've gone through, all is perfect, please issue to the client. That is your evidence of the person authorizing release. But what's so important there, and this is in general with emails, is make sure that email is then saved back to the project. And I always say, put it in the folder together with that document. So if you're not around and someone's saying, right, where is the evidence that, where's that traceability back to the person that authorized the release of this document? If it's in that folder, they can immediately see, this came from this person via this email. But very important, have that evidence of the person authorizing the release. And again, this ties up with our authorization matrix. So make sure the correct person is authorizing the release of that document. Then question 19 under documentation and procurement asks the question, does the company keep documented evidence that all issued deliverables are received by the relevant external parties and that superseded deliverables are identified? So this is very important, and this talks to your company's transmittal system. So anything that you're issuing, especially if it's going to a third party, must have evidence that they received it. So have some sort of transmittals. I swear by document registers. I love to issue document registers to external parties saying, this is the list of all my documents. Please confirm that you've got those. Transmittals can also have evidence in email. So if I email a drawing to someone and they respond saying, thank you, I've received that, that's evidence of my transmittal. So think about how you're going to do that. A nice creative way that I've seen with companies doing, especially when they have to do hard copy submission of tenders, they've got their date stamps on their smartphones. So they take a photo of the tender going into the box. It gets date stamped. That's evidence that that document was delivered on the correct date at the correct time. So very important is have evidence of that. And I've actually had the debate with some engineers. They say, but if I email, that's fine. Then it's out of my hands. When you get into a legal battle, the onus rests on the sender to prove that the recipient got it. So for me, maybe I'm just like I always think of the risks involved. But if I email something, that's not enough for me. I'll follow it up and with a phone call, or I would want them to respond with an email. And then once I've got that, then I know, yes, they actually have got that information. So make sure that you've got that. Again, if you've got these transmittals or the evidence that you issued something, if something does go wrong and say a contractor claims delays on site because you didn't issue him with information timelessly, if you've got that evidence, it's going to protect you through that claim. Right, then we get on to stage 5, which talks about contract administration and construction. So question 20 asks the question, does the company provide and document suitable monitoring and measuring activities to ensure the requirements contained within the issued deliverables are achieved on site? And I think this for me is so crucial at your construction stage. And the evidence that we're looking for is some sort of site inspections, site monitoring records, site diaries. I mean, it even goes down to site instructions, variation orders, all that type of things. But make sure you have got evidence that you are monitoring and measuring on site. Yeah, and I mean, these could, they're also, we've just put the prompt down here, could be test results, contractors' progress reports. Have evidence of those. And just what I'm also picking up is a lot of engineers keep all their records on site and they're not doing backups back to the office. I always recommend make sure whatever you're generating on site, have a record back in the office. I mean, there have been stories of site office burning down, site offices being blown into dams. We had also an incident where an RE was hijacked and his car was stolen and he had all the documents in his car, but they hadn't been backed up back to the office. So in those cases, a lot of the information gets missed, gets lost. So be creative again. If you're not getting copies maybe of the site instructions, take a photo when you're on site. And you know, what's up that back to someone in the office to save onto your server. But try and be proactive in getting that information back to your office. And also just a note there as well, make sure if the guys are doing site inspections that they complete the inspection form in full. We find a lot of people, you know, forgetting to put the dates or the times or getting it signed off by the contractor or whoever was witnessing the testing or the inspection. Very important is to have comprehensive documents. And again, also here, go and think about alternative ways of doing this. A lot of consultants use apps on their smartphones. They're wonderful ones with, you know, for auditing. I use one called Site Audit Pro, but there's iAudit, there's Audit on the Go. Fantastic apps that allow you to take photos while you're on site, enter in comments, assign activities to certain individuals, and at the end of the day, you've got a comprehensive site report. So be creative. Think of different ways of how you can actually document this. Right, then question 21 under our construction asks the question, if the company uses monitoring and measuring equipment, is this equipment controlled to ensure that accurate results are achieved during the measuring and monitoring processes? So if you are going out to sites and you do have equipment that you're using to monitor and measure, make sure that that equipment, firstly, if it's been transported to site, it's been transported in a safe sort of environment, that you're not throwing your dumpy level on the back of a bucky and it's bouncing around. So make sure that equipment is safeguarded on the way while it's being transported. And then also make sure that if your equipment needs to be calibrated, that you do calibration, you do have calibration certificates. I think this is also something here, a lot of this is being taken over. Sorry, Rovan, can you mute yourself, please? A lot of this is taken over by our contractors. And I think also we should still have a level of responsibility here to make sure that our contractors are using equipment that's controlled. So generally, if I'm overseeing a site and I'm seeing the contractors appointing maybe testing labs or whoever, make sure like a testing lab is SANIS accredited so that they are actually being reviewed by an external body as well, making sure that all their equipment that they're using has been calibrated correctly. And I mean, don't feel shy to also ask your contractor for calibration records of the equipment that they're using on site. Rather, you know, be too detailed in your requirements than not asking and then find out at the end of the day, but this equipment was given faulty readings. So at the end of the day, the stuff that was produced is not correct. So just make sure with your control of your equipment, have some sort of, if you do taking equipment to site, have equipment registers, have calibration records. Right, then we get to the last one, which our last stage, which is our closeout. And basically, question 22 asks, does the company ensure that all project requirements, including statutory and regulatory, risk management, etc., have been met in a closeout report or similar? So the evidence that you can show there is a project closeout report. That again, it could be, most clients do require something like that at the end of the day. But generally, if you're not doing closeout reports, I like to do a closeout checklist that ties back into the requirements that we set up front. So I'll go and have a look what was in my contract, what did we agree to with the client right up front. I'll also tie it back to my project plan, my quality plan. We identified these were maybe our objectives, these were our risks on the project, just to make sure that we've closed out all those issues, we've addressed all those issues. And also when you're doing your project closeout report is then to think about things like lessons learned. What could we learn? What's a positive thing coming out of this? What could we share with our team, with our clients, or just do a sharing internally? But it's important to close out your project correctly. And again, in this closeout, it could be prompting to archiving of documentation, checking that all your site documents have been collated from site, have been filed correctly. So I find also a lot of organizations don't do a proper closeout. It's, when you've done your completion certificate, it's just so exciting to move to the next project, but it's so important to do a proper closeout of your project, just to tie up all the loose ends, learn from the good things and the bad things, and implement those going forward. Then question 23 in the stage closeout basically asks, does the company proactively obtain feedback from the client and other interested stakeholders in order to assess if project requirements have been met? And the evidence that you can show here is demonstrate client feedback. You can request reference letters. And I think my bit of advice here is as well is, feedback from the client, I generally don't just leave it until the end of the project, till your closeout, because if the client is unhappy about something, you don't have the opportunity or the time frame to correct it. So I encourage consultants, as you're going through your project delivery, interact with your client. Make sure that the client is happy with maybe the level of documentation or the level of communication. Very important is that you sourcing that feedback and you acting on that feedback. I think a lot of organizations also struggle to get feedback from clients. And I also just recommend, we don't have to have official feedback from a client. Your official feedback from the client should be a reference letter, because that is what you're going to be using going forward. That's going to that demonstrates to other clients what are your capabilities. So reference letter, yes, that should be signed off by a client. But if you have an informal discussions with a client and you understand that maybe they're not happy about a certain aspect of the project, you can raise that on behalf of the client and log it into your maybe your client feedback database, where you can start acting on these things. Because the reason why we must get feedback is that we need to improve our systems. We need to make sure that we are addressing the requirements of the client. So again, I keep on saying, be creative in how you go about doing things, and especially feedback. Clients hate putting stuff on paper. Have a discussion with them. You come back to the office and you document it on their behalf. They don't have to sign it off, because the feedback is there to help you improve going forward.
Diane?
Right.
Diane?
Hi, Shaul.
Yes, we got a question from Ashan Singh. He asks, how do we address professional bias when reporting?
Ashan, do you want to just maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Hi, sorry. Just a comment on if you have an issue with the insurance company and they're getting the engineers to come and do a report, and it's kind of biased with the insurer. Yeah, something in those terms.
Sure. I don't know. That's a difficult one. I don't know if the quality system can address that, but I don't know. Maybe Charles, Philip, you got some input there?
Yeah, I think in my mind, we just need to acknowledge the party that's drafting the reports, and unfortunately, you know, we can only control ourselves and our own documents. We can't control what they say. So I think in my mind, I would just, in my response, point out if you do pick up any biases in their reports, to just make a note and put that in your response. You know, when I first read that question, I thought he was referring to somebody who, you know, in your client's feedback, if you're picking up bias in there, you know, it's, at the end of the day, we're all humans, and it might actually just be a, you know, personality clash. And I think you know, you can include in your records, your client feedback survey records, that, you know, I had a personality clash with this PM, and so I don't think his review of my system is a true reflection of its quality, and just put the record in and have it as part of the history.
Yeah, Charles, I definitely agree with you. And also, Ashton, I think, you know, with professional bias, if you're reporting on something, always make sure you can tie it back to a requirement. So be it a design code, ISO standard, legislation, because I find that is where it starts getting gray. If someone can't tie it back to a requirement and say, this is what is required, that is going to be I think, really important. Because if you go back to basics, to first principles, and you say, but this is, I reported on this is what the requirement said, that's going to cover you a lot. And then also, like what Charles says, when it comes to more where you can't put it back onto maybe a requirement or a standard or a piece of legislation, if it is like a feeling, what does the client feel about us? Like Charles says, guys can have bad days and, you know, just lash out at someone. It's in my feedback that I have, if it comes back from a client, there's actually a portion at the bottom that says, do you agree with this feedback, you know, from a professional point of view within your industry? Because remember, you're using that feedback internally to say, no, look, he was being a bit unreasonable here, or saying, yes, no, he actually did raise a very valid point, and I think we should be acting on this. Great. Okay.
Exactly.
So that brings us to the end of our project delivery.